You have arrived at Locally Sourced.
All right, Middletown. Locally Sourced is back for 2025, and we are really excited because Middletown's official podcast has a great Middletown resident, a guy that I got to see in action who would beat up on my favorite baseball team all the time, but a guy with nearly 1,200 strikeouts in Major League Baseball, a guy who has traveled not just America playing America's pastime, but has traveled the world playing this game as an Atlanta Brave, a Padre, a National, a Rocky, a St. Louis Cardinal champion, world champion, St. Louis Cardinal, and as a player for Team Israel in the World Baseball Classic, my good friend Jason Marquis. Jason? Thanks for being here, buddy.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Excited just to talk whichever road it leads us.
Yeah. So, Jay, tell me, how did you, as a kid, right? Because a lot of people see baseball athletes, and I'm a junkie, and you and I have talked about this a bunch of times because I was at the last game of Veterans Stadium that you were pitching those final 3 outs, right?
I did. I think I was the last professional game. I don't know if there was any college games afterwards, but
yeah,
the last professional game, Atlanta Braves versus the Phillies. I got my first and only career save in that game.
Is that right?
And that was the end of Veterans Stadium.
Yeah, wow. And Atlanta Braves beat the Philadelphia Phillies, and it was, I think the Phillies were actually on the cusp. They needed like 2 things to happen. I think they needed the Astros, who were in the National League at the time, still to lose, and they needed somebody else to lose, and then there was a potential for a possible playoff game to determine who was going to make it to the playoffs that year. But thanks to Jason Marquis' save that day, it ended Veterans Stadium and the Phillies' 2003 season that year. And I think that was the years of like John Lieber was the Phillies' #1 pitcher. So it was rough. It was rough days for the Philadelphia Phillies back then.
Listen, no matter what players they had, and John Lieber was an ex-teammate of mine with the Cubs, but it was always a battle. Inter-division rival, same conference. Braves, Mets, Phillies. There were always interesting matchups with the fans getting into it, yelling, screaming. I mean, you know how Philly fans can be, but. They were always battles. There was never one team that really, maybe the Marlins in moments, you sort of was like the redheaded stepchild of that division occasionally, but it was always a battle.
Yeah. So, for so many, we see these players as, young guys playing this game, young men playing this game. But the start of this begins much, much earlier. And tell us, you're a young kid growing up in Staten Island. Tell us about your journey from, your youth baseball to your breakout into Major League Baseball.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a long story. We can condense it a little bit, but like any kid in America's pastime, usually following in parents' footsteps, depending where you're from and what your parents did. But baseball was at the forefront of the sports world. Especially a short white guy. Basketball is really not in your future. Maybe a slot wide receiver. That's the reality of the situation. So you start to play all these sports, basketball, baseball, and you start to have success and fall in love with the game and your success and the process behind everything. And it just starts out with having fun, wanting to be the best, trying to hit home runs, win ball games. And as time progresses and you start to climb the ladder within Little League and youth baseball, and you start to realize, oh, okay, there's something there. There's a talent there. I see myself better than the people standing next to me. And remember, that's just one little pocket of the United States. I mean, you don't realize as you get to high school, you're dealing with 49 other states and a million, 2, 3, 4, 5 million kids ball playing, following the same path and dream as you. And you start to realize there is a possibility that, I want to be a Major League Baseball player. At that point, it's different now because you have Instagram and all these social media outlets where it's thrown in your face. Like you could grab a clip of any player at any time, and it's almost like you could touch them. It's a reality.
Yeah.
being 46, I'm a little bit older than you, I assume. It wasn't as in your face. So you sort of had to go out and research and try to stay up for This Week in Baseball on Saturday morning.
Scouts weren't watching.
Scouts weren't watching. Like, you weren't able to throw a video of yourself. So you sort of had to make a name for yourself in your area. And it really started probably around 10, 11 years old, where I was competing at a high level with kids 3 years older than me. And it started more as my parents were like, all right, let's make this a college thing. How far can we take this game? If you get a full scholarship to college, there'll be an incentive, whether it's buy a car. I save the money, so it starts to become a reality. And you start to just revolve and live your life around that. And you get to high school, all of a sudden with me, my talent level was there. My baseball IQ, my want, desire was all there. My competitive nature is through the roof. Anybody knows me, that's my brain and my competitive nature are probably my two strong suits.
I know, we've played golf before.
And but I never grew. I started high school 5'1.5", 5'2". So the journey sort of could have took a screeching halt, but I sort of didn't let that bother me. I kept grinding out, going about my business, understanding people may grow at different rates, no matter what scouts or colleges or local people would say that, hey, you're too small. I don't let that affect me.
And by this time, you had already pitched in the Little League World Series.
I already pitched in the Little League World Series.
A no-hitter.
Yeah, well, I skipped over that portion. But you start to realize I've had success at this game, pitching in the Little League World Series and dominating whatever level I've been at. Like, this could happen.
How old were you?
I was 12 for the Little League World Series, turning 13 in Williamsport that they play every year.
Yeah.
We finished second in the United States, third in the world. What a great run. Also to, propel me for my dreams, to understand, like, playing in front of 30,000 people at 12.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, this is great.
As opposed to 50 parents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I think I was always good at locking in and blocking out the noise. I was so focused on the task at hand and being a great baseball player and winning games. You sort of lose sight of what's going on around you. You sort of soak it in early, and then you just go back to your job, and that's win, right? Win ball games. That was my mentality. Didn't matter who I was playing. My opponent had no face. I didn't care if it was you, my mom, my wife, my sister. Like, my opponent has no face when I play. The goal is to win. So
you didn't care who was up there. You were going to pitch the way you knew how to pitch.
I understood that if I did everything that I had to do and master myself and be as good as I could be, the opponent is irrelevant because it comes down to execution at that point, right? So now every hitter may have a different hot zone or weak zone.
Sure. You
just attack those or not attack based on what you do well. And there was a talent separation at level, so I could get away with a little bit of talent against other guys and not worry about execution as much. And when vice versa, when I hit, same thing. I just had to know what the pitcher did well, what he was trying to do, and just be ready for mistakes, right? So go to high school, and I played basketball also, so I was a multi-sport athlete. But sophomore year, I was 5'5". I was a very good basketball player. I was a point guard, averaged, whatever numbers, 15 and 7 assists. We won ball games. But I'm like, well, baseball's my path to the future, whether it's at college or the next level. And I made a choice, which I really think helped me in the long run, which a lot of kids nowadays have a tough time doing. Now, I do believe in multi-sport from like 7 to like 15. But once you know what your path is, I think you need to start to
hone in on it.
Hone in and eliminate. So I wound up quitting basketball. Basketball coaches, high school were upset. But it's something that I needed to do for my future. And from that moment on, I was able to gain back hours, right? Time's the one thing we never could get back in life, right? It disappears. So I estimated I would get 60 hours a week or a month during basketball season back, and it came out to like 8 months because it would have been my junior, senior year. So that's almost 500 hours that I couldn't get back. Now I could dedicate to my craft, which if you're not doing it, my people I'm competing against, if you're not doing it, you're not catching up to me.
Right.
Now, if I was a 6'6" specimen who could jump through the roof, I also threw hard, you could sort of now, maybe I'm a basketball player in college. Maybe I'm a baseball player, and you sort of could go down that path a little bit. And from there, I I started to grow physically, strength-wise, and my pure stuff, running speed, velocity of my fastball, how hard I hit the baseball, just took an enormous leap.
Mm-hmm.
And
because you were fully dedicated.
Yeah, I was
yourself
fully
to the game.
dedicated to the mindset was always there. The emotional part was always there. Now it was like, let's get physical, right?
Yeah.
Let's get stronger and functionally stronger for the game that I'm trying to pursue.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it started to unfold. I started getting invited to bigger national tournaments where you could be seen by colleges.
Right.
I'm just in a little pocket in Staten Island, New York, right?
Right.
You know, you have your St. John's, your Rutgers, your CSI, like local colleges.
Yep.
But I had way bigger dreams than that.
Yeah.
And I finally got invited to a big showcase tournament with the Northeast team to go to California. And from that point on,
Where every college is.
where
seen.
there was 200 colleges,
Right.
40 scouts for Major League Baseball, and I essentially put my name on the map. But in reality, you do have to be ready for that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You can't wait till the moment to be ready. You have to be ready. This was in the makings since I was 10 years old. Everything I've done, from whether it was in my house, how fast can I run from my basement up to the top floor?
Sure.
Can I touch the ceiling in my house? Like the competitive side where everything was a win or loss situation.
Yeah.
I was a paper boy. How fast can I deliver the newspaper? Well, tomorrow I'm going to beat that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's always that, I got to be better. I got to be better. I got to be better. And I think once you start to create that about yourself, there's no moment too big, especially if you prepare the right way. You always go back to your prep work. I always try to tell youth the game is really the easy part because it goes back to timing, right? I use LeBron James as a perfect example. Obviously, because the argument top greatest player of all time. I'm a Michael Jordan guy. That's something different.
Yeah.
But the fact is, he plays 80 games a year, 40 minutes a game. It's 3,200 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? If you break it down, that's what, 500 hours about?
Yeah.
Right? 50 hours. No, that's 50 hours. 50 hours. Sorry, 50 hours. Well, how much time do you think he spends on his body, his dribbling skills, his jump shot, his free throw, his sleep habits? You're talking about that he probably spends thousands of hours. So it's basically like almost like a 10-to-1 ratio of
For every hour that he's playing
in
basketball.
a game. So really, what's
Right.
the more important part of the equation?
Yeah.
Your-
Off the court.
off the court, your habits off the court, your thought process off the court. So if you're prepared for that, which I was, the game essentially becomes easy because it becomes an extension of how you prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned into me having to choose a college after coming back from that tournament in California. It was the area code games. It was the biggest showcase in the country.
Who's coming after you at that point?
So when I got home, there was no cell phones. We had voicemail at that point on the phone.
Yeah.
I actually, when I was out there, got invited.
With the tape, right?
Yeah, it was. Well, you had the recording on the phone at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know if we had the. I remember it was after the tape. It was like when voicemail first came out.
Okay.
Right. And
The digital answering.
the digital
machine.
answer machine.
Yeah.
So when I was out there, parents were out there, another family friend, and they wound up asking me to play for Team USA. But Team USA was already set.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess after my performance, they were like, "Oh, he could be a good addition." So I stayed at a host family's house out there for a week, and then in high school I went to Japan and Korea with Team USA. But when my parents got home, I think there was about 150 to 200 voicemails on my parents' voicemail. Because, you fill out a form with your phone number,
Yeah, of
your
course.
parents, and so they give to all the colleges, who's this guy. And from then, I just had to start doing my research, process of elimination, talk to coaches on the phone, and come up with about 10 schools that I might. I mean, you can't research 150 schools. You got to figure out what meets your needs academically, coaching style, location in the United States, the whole
What role you're going to play.
Yes, what role you're going to play. Basically the same process a student goes through, but you're just adding now the component of coaching and athletics.
Yeah.
And then from there, it turned into like, all right, you're going to probably get drafted. We don't know where yet. And then as time unfolds and more scouts see you, then they start throwing projections on you.
Mm-hmm.
So it went from, okay, wow, I get a free car. I'm going to college for free.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And then it's like, whoa, you're going to get drafted.
Yeah.
Now you have a choice to make when you do get drafted. So it started out like third to sixth round draft pick.
Yeah.
I was an undersized righty from the Northeast. A lot of teams, if you were a pitcher and you were not above 6'2", like, we're not taking you in the first round. We may take you in the third, fourth. Then all of a sudden, I started pitching more events. More people saw me. I jumped up to the second to fourth round. Winter goes by. Start to work out more. Bigger, stronger, faster. High school season comes. Now there's a flood of scouts coming to the game. And the way I'm throwing the ball now, like the head honchos, the GMs of the team, the head of scouting,
They're all coming.
they're all coming. So now I was projected to go from in between the 20th and 40th pick. So it was basically the first round and first round supplemental. And there were no teams in the top 20 would take him. They would call now my advisors at the time, which are my agents, which you weren't allowed to say they were your agents or sign with them because there will be eligibility problems if you decided to go to college.
Right.
So,
which is like amazing to think about now with college.
Like,
Like,
college
it's-
we could talk about that for days and days and weeks.
Right.
It's a different animal than my era. And teams are like, listen, my agents are like, you're not getting drafted at top 20. You're a top 20 talent, but you're not 6'2". Which puts a little chip on your shoulder.
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And I wound up getting drafted by the Braves, the 35th pick, which was first round supplemental. And I had a decision to make. I committed to the University of Miami, which was a powerhouse for 30 plus years with Jim Morris was the head coach. Turtle Thomas was a recruiter. Laser Callazo was a pitching coach. Coaches come to my house and, try to sell me on coming to their
the whole
school.
pitch, yeah.
Then I would go on the recruiting trips. So it was a hard decision. My mother was a pro-education. Not that I was against education, but I wanted to get my career started.
Yeah.
I was in the right spot.
You're putting all this time and energy into the craft.
And the reality of it is I was physically, emotionally, and mentally ready. There's some kids that need 3 years of growing up to do. I wasn't one of those. But at the same time, where I got drafted from a financial standpoint, and I'll always bet on myself. So this is like me maybe betting against myself, but I will always bet on myself. I only had 34 slots to move up in the draft in 3 years. And there's a lot more that probably could go wrong than that could go right. So I had to increase my ability, but...
And each of those slots is going to have a salary that they can pay you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the higher you go, the more leniency, the more times you get to screw up in the minor leagues. But, listen, you're a pitcher. You could get hurt. College, you live a different lifestyle maybe.
Yeah.
You got schoolwork, so maybe you couldn't dedicate as much time to baseball as school.
Right.
So I chose to obviously forego college and sign with the Atlanta Braves with the 35th pick.
So you brought up a really good point, and we touched on it briefly about social media, right? And now I scroll through because right, baseball is only a couple days away. Pitchers and catchers have already reported for baseball. Everybody's getting ready for spring training to start this week. How, I'll flip through Instagram or something and I'll see, college kids that are, they're whipping it up there, and they're dipping from 97 on their fast to 85 and on their change up, whatever, on their off speed pitch. And you're like, oh my gosh. But this is them putting a portfolio out there in terms of what abilities they have. And I think there's a competition just like with football and just like with basketball about how to showcase themselves where millions of people are able to watch them rather than the scout from, the Mets goes out and watches them, How do you think, what positives and negatives are there from today as opposed to when you were drafted? You're talking about going out and showcasing your stuff and meeting a lot of other young athletes that are also going to be drafted or potentially drafted, or they're going to spend some time in the minors and they're going to go to college, then they'll be in the minors, then they'll maybe make it to the big league. How do you think that's changed the game, if at all?
That's a good question. It's a double-edged sword, right? I'm a firm believer, maybe it's the era I grew up in, we've almost shifted, and it hurts a lot of high school kids also going to college too, where it's almost become a metric base game, sort of like the combine,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you follow football,
Sure.
this guy runs a 4.3. This guy jumps this high. This guy could bench. They're not always good football players, right?
Right.
Not that I'm comparing them, their peers to their peers. I'm not comparing them to a pee-wee football player,
Right.
obviously. So, and I think you lose the eye test, the feel of what a player is when you see him. Like,
Mhm.
you could walk to any baseball field, any basketball court. Before you see their physical tools of jumping high, running, there's something about them, a demeanor,
How they shake your hand.
how they
walk
shake
up
your
to
hand. I'll tell you that story. Actually, remind me of that helped. Some kids also play faster in the game than they do their metrics, because I think about this a lot because my son went through the recruiting process of baseball and how to teach parents and young kids. There is a realness to brain processing speed.
Mm-hmm.
All sports, if you break it down, is who can make the correct decision the quickest.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily can my hand move the fastest or throw the hardest. Can I run faster and beat you to the spot? Can I jump higher to get to the ball first?
Mm-hmm.
It's who can make the correct decision the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see that, you can't see that on film. You can't see that from a kid just throwing off a mound in a building because it says 95.8 with 2,400 spin. All good. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
That is still part of the equation. I'm not taking that away. But they miss out on a lot of players, or sometimes choose the wrong player because they miss that part of the equation. Like, that's what separates Tom Brady from Zach Wilson. Let's use Zach Wilson, right? They both throw a tight spiral 73 yards.
Sure.
Zach Wilson's technically faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what does Tom Brady do better? He reads defenses. He progresses and scans the field quicker to make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
That's what separates the elite from that next level,
Yeah.
right? So I think
The IQ part.
the
of
IQ part, and it's just more than IQ because they're kids with IQ, but they make the right decision too slow. The moment passed,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I bet you Zach Wilson has good IQ,
You're right.
but he doesn't make it as quick, right? It's like taking a test with a time on it. I want to get the 100 within the 42 minutes, as opposed to on a 50-question test, you may only answer 46 correctly and never got to the bottom 4, but I did all 50 correct. Like, even though you may got them all right, but I got 4 more right than you because there's a time component in all sports. You run out of time with a defender cutting you off in basketball and football, an offensive lineman blocking because the defender's going. Baseball, think about it. How quick decision you have to make. Ball out of hand, hitter's got to swing.
Yeah.
Like, you could take
In
the most beautiful
milliseconds.
You could take the most beautiful swing at the wrong time, you're out. I could not read the ball off the bat on a ball in the hole, base hit, as opposed to my defender who got the jump on the ball.
The
who
shortstop
may not
that
be
knew that step to take.
That's right. He may not be as fast as the other guy, makes the play.
Yeah, right.
So that's really the component that they miss. So I think from the social media standpoint to the eye test, you sort of miss some really good athletes and really good players because you're valuing metrics sometimes more over. But then if you're a smart guy, maybe you make relationships. A buddy of mine in Texas calls me, hey, there's a guy up in the Northeast. You mind taking a look at him? So hopefully you have coaches that rely on people that they trust instead of just doing favors, where maybe they could send somebody with an eye test to help them get to that next level. And that was the one thing. It goes back to being 10 years old. How fast can I get upstairs? Can I cut that corner? Can I touch that? Can I do my paper out quicker? Those are skills you're developing to make the correct decision nowadays. And then the adverse side, the effect it has on kids is, yeah, they're on social media on their phones, but they're not firing their brain at it. They're just looking and reading.
How many people are liking my post?
Oh, yeah. Like, instead of creating that competition level. So it has its positives because then sometimes you would never be seen, but you actually got to be seen.
Right.
So I think it has a positive in that sense, but I think that's where it ends. I think you have a chance to get your name out to somebody in Texas or North Dakota or Hawaii to see you that might not otherwise see you, but that's the only positive I see out of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's this guy that's on Instagram, and he's gotten famous from and he's a kicker, right? He's a football kicker, and he is hitting these field goals that are 65 yards, and you're like, how is it possible that a guy that can kick a ball 65 yards is not signing with the way that kickers come at it. And I sat there and somebody sent it to me and I'm like, but when he puts pads and a helmet on and there's 3 seconds left and your team is down or it's tie, can he hit that 65-footer?
Yeah.
65-yarder?
Well, like
maybe not. But on Instagram, he makes it seem like he could.
Yeah, and that's the metric side.
Right.
As opposed to the difference of a Hall of Famer making a pitch with second and third in a one-run game, get back in the dugout, 3-2 score is.
Sure.
Or the guy who doesn't.
Right.
Even though this guy throws 96.8 and this guy doesn't. Right? So there is that component what we just spoke about that it's tough to do, but that's why they give these guys chances, and the minute they show they can't do it, they're gone and they're replaced.
Right.
Right? It wasn't as replaceable back in the day.
Right.
Right? It was like, we're going to stick with this guy.
Yeah.
They were able to see more.
We made an investment.
Made an investment. We saw him pitch enough. We saw his demeanor. We know what he's about. That was one thing that you're talking about shaking hand. So the Braves head of scouting came to see me 2 or 3 times. And after one game, it actually was probably my worst high school game that year, but we won. Mm-hmm. After the game, he came over, introduced himself. This guy's name was Paul Snyder. He would grab your hand and pull you like nose to nose.
Yeah.
Like you could smell what he ate for breakfast,
yeah,
right? And just grab your hand and hold on to it and shake it and stare you in the eye. And after they drafted me, about a year later, we were down in spring training, and he came over to me and told me that story. He goes, we had our scout. Oh, we love this guy, Jason. He does this. He throws this hard, blah, blah. And when he came to see me, he goes, after I did that, it sold me. That could have been the difference maker of whether they went with Tommy Smith or Jason Marquis.
Right.
Right? And now, obviously, that has to be taught to you. Shake hands, look a guy in the eye.
Sure.
Stand up tall, chest out, and, it helped me, get drafted at that point where it could have been a different scenario.
Yeah. Who knows how many spots you could have gone down, and because
you don't know
whatever team needs whatever position. Yeah. I mean, it's that's a good story and understanding that just that handshake and demeanor after what wasn't a great game.
Yeah, remember, it's not a measurable. So people think that you're making this stuff up,
right? Because
you can't measure a handshake and you can measure a jump.
Yeah.
So there are these intangibles and non-measurables that you should be able to work on your own if you ever put in that moment. Just like you would go to the gym and lift weights and run and jump, throw bullpens and work on your pitches and playing catch. Just like you work on those, work on the intangibles also. Because you know what? Somebody's always watching, right? There's always somebody watching. You don't know. It could be a father watching his son on another field who happens to be the assistant coach at Old Dominion.
Yeah. What
if he turns his head? Whoa, who's that guy?
Right.
Hey, wife, I'm going to miss Johnny's bat. I just want to go see something over here. There was an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You can't wait for them to say, hey, Tony, I'm going to be at your game tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Make sure in your third at bat. No, you just always got to be prepared and ready to go because you don't know who's watching.
Are you looking for fun and enriching activities for your child this summer? Good news! Middletown's Parks and Recreation's 2025 summer camps are opening soon for registration. Middletown residents can sign up via our new platform, RecDesk, for a variety of camps starting Monday, March 3rd at 10 a.m. Non-residents can begin to register the following week on Monday, March 10th, also at 10 a.m. Since the registration process is new this year, listen up carefully. Before registration officially opens, visit mtownrec.recdesk.com to either create an account or sign into your existing one. Once you're logged in, enroll your child as a camp member under the membership section. Registering a camp member costs $20 or more, depending on how many shirts you select. Complete the camp forms prior to registration to help save time. This fee covers the cost of shirts and is a prereq to register. If your child doesn't make it off the wait list, don't worry, you will be reimbursed. When registration officially opens, you can find all our camps under the program section. Please select your child under member and choose the correct fee type. Add new registrations if adding more camp weeks or more children. Once complete, go to your cart or checkout at the top right of the page. Our camps are open to students from pre-K to 9th grade and range from traditional camp options to educational and specialty programs. You can find additional information on middletownnj.org/camp. The best days are spent at camp, so start the sign-up process now.
Who's somebody in your career that really, whether it was early on, really left like the biggest impression for you, whether, it was in high school or in the minors or in the major leagues? Like, who's somebody that you always think back to a piece of advice or you relied on as a young player?
Well, obviously as a youth, it's always your parents,
Sure.
right? My parents always put me in a good position to succeed. No matter where I wanted to go, when I wanted to do it, they were there. They shuffled me and dragged me everywhere across the Northeast to my Little League games, never missed a game. They had my back and supported my dream and whatever it took, even when people thought they were crazy. So from that standpoint, obviously, from a youth player, it was my parents allowing me to be me, right? Not putting any, handcuffs on me or shackles for me to grow as who I wanted to be. And as you get older, you become smart enough and learn to make your own decisions, and then you start getting around some really smart people. The one thing I will say, I know a lot of people may look at this as like a knock, but it's not. And they always ask me, like, who's the best coach you ever had? And I said, I always had great information providers, but I'm my own best coach. Like, nobody knows what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. So I got to learn to input all the information I gathered from these great mentors. And, right, it's like walking to a library. Library's not great. It's the books that, how do you, right? It's the information, right?
Sure.
You have to learn how to input it, what you've learned. But, as a young player, I was blessed to be in a great organization with the Atlanta Braves. And my first call up, my first 4 years, I mean, when you have likes of Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, Chipper Jones, I mean, Hall of Famers all around, you basically was eyes open, ears open, mouth shut. And then you just start to learn to see how they work. And they all sort of had their own way about succeeding. And you sort of like watch them move. Then you start playing golf with them to see how they think off the field. And you take bits and pieces from everyone. And I formed great relationships with all of them. They were all open to helping the next generation succeed. Yeah. Maddox, it was probably the smartest baseball player I've ever been around. So you learn to the little parts of the game that he's three moves ahead, right? His preparation of how do he wants to attack hitters was so far above. Then you got Smoltz. His competitive drive was through the roof. Like, there was nobody. And then Glavine was like more of a business-like. So you sort of like took little pieces from all of them and try to input into. And then I get traded, and another guy in the Braves who really took me was a guy, John Burkett, pitched in the big leagues 15 years with the Giants, the Marlins, just taking me under his wing and going to dinner with them, and just how to balance the family with baseball. Then go to St. Louis, was where I really made my mark after I got traded to St. Louis. And guys like Jeff Suppan, Woody Williams. And it doesn't always have to be the Hall of Famers. Jeff Suppan teaching me getting a little more routine-oriented and understanding what he had to do to get ready. Woody Williams, same thing. Didn't get to the big leagues to 29 years old and wound up pitching 13 years, 14 years in the big leagues. He went through trials and tribulations. So you start to learn about these guys on what they did. And then you're also going through it with your peers, like a Mark DeRosa, who travel through the big leagues and the minor leagues together.
Yeah.
So you're doing it on the same journey, so you can sort of bounce ideas. And then all of a sudden, you basically become Maddox and Woody Williams. The roles reverse, where you're no longer the young guy, you're the veteran.
Right.
You're still learning, you're still trying to get better, and you start to impart your knowledge on the next generation. And the roles sort of reverse a little bit. So it was a pretty cool journey to see the involvement of myself from a 21-year-old in the big leagues with the Braves to my final years with the Padres and the Reds as a 36-year-old veteran, 37-year-old veteran.
What's your favorite stadium to play in?
The one I got the win in. Whatever game I won in. No, I'm joking. From a there's I break it into two categories. Like one that's aesthetically like wow, pleasing, and ones that I pitched well in.
Sure.
So I try to break it down into two categories. I loved pitching on the West Coast. I threw the ball well in San Fran, San Diego, L.A., Pittsburgh. I threw the ball well in. Colorado, surprisingly, I threw the ball really well. Arizona, that's for the birds. That's like probably my worst stadium. Not a big fan. But so from those pitching standpoints, those were my top. From a wow factor as a fan, like wow, this stadium's pretty nice. Citi Field, they did a great job on. Pittsburgh, Minnesota. The appeal of Fenway, like I don't know, like that. It was still like you were back in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
The appeal of Fenway was unbelievable to me. So those were some of my.
Did you get that when you were with the Cubs too at Wrigley?
Cubs were a home stadium. I did, but I didn't. I don't know if it was because I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I didn't grow up on it as much because I was a Yankee fan, and it was the Northeast. It was Yankees versus Red Sox.
Sure.
It has history, and I love Wrigley. I love the day games. Living in the city, Chicago is probably my favorite city in America, not New York. I take New York. Grew up in New York. Yeah. Take that out of the equation. Chicago is my favorite city in the country, with San Diego close second.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't have the same feel to me as Fenway.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Other people may have different. Even Yankee Stadium. Growing up a Yankee fan, the old Yankee Stadium, I didn't get that
nostalgia.
The nostalgia.
Yeah.
Right. I got to pitch in Yankee Stadium and Shea Stadium as a junior and senior in high school. We won the New York City championship back-to-back years. So maybe I was there already.
Sure.
And it sort of wore off. But yeah, so Fenway had a little more in the old school, and those other ones really, when you rolled up to them, you're like, wow, this is a pretty place.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other ones, it's like, wow, I can't wait to get there so I could get a win.
Yeah.
Right?
So as a pitcher, obviously you're facing hundreds of players that play the game. Who did you're looking at the lineup card. You're seeing who's in, who's out, where they're situating people. And I feel like nowadays the lineup card is so much more fluid than it used to be. I feel, but back in the day, I feel like it was the lineup card. You knew where everybody was hitting,
yes,
right? And they knew where they were hitting because that's where they hit, right? You knew Chipper Jones and Andrew Jones were going to bat 3 and 4,
mm-hmm.
right? It was just that was how Bobby Cox had that lineup set, right? Who did you love facing? Team-wise, player-wise, who did you hate facing?
Well, listen, you based on your stuff, early in my career, I was a 4-seam, slider, occasional changeup guy, and as time went on, I evolved into a sinker, slider, split guy. So your matchups sometimes could be great against a great lineup, right? And you have success. And sometimes against lineups that are quote unquote not as potent as other ones, you struggle. But it was more an individualistic type thing where certain hitters had my number, and no matter what I threw, whether I was tipping pitches, maybe I created a pattern against them that I never changed. Maybe they just saw the ball well out of my hand. And then there's some hitters that are Hall of Famers that you were like, they're an out.
No big deal.
They're no big deal. They're an out, right? Then there's days where you feel absolutely terrible, and you're like, I don't know how I'm getting out of this game.
Yeah.
Then there's games like, don't matter if there's 6 Mickey Mantles in the lineup.
Yeah.
They're out.
Right.
Right? But it's those other like 15, 18 starts a year where like it could go either way. And it goes back to pitch execution and a good game plan. You sort of have to navigate your way through a lineup, make adjustments on the fly. So I don't know if there was one specific. I do know this. I know, like I said, on the West Coast, it didn't matter the lineup. I always felt really comfortable. I think a lot had to do with I threw a sinker. My ball moved a lot. And out there's like this marine layer where the ball tends to move a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So with a little more movement on my ball, a little more depth, makes it a little tougher for the hitter to square up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the reasons I probably had success out there. Day games, I always threw better. I had success in Chicago. So if you look, my day game numbers are through the roof.
Oh, really?
If I pitched all day games, I might be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. But Yeah, and listen, as you get, I was an evolving pitcher. I was a 95, 96 guy first 4 or 5 years, and I was a 93, 94 sinker guy, and by the end I was 88 to 92.
Mm-hmm.
And you sort of have to learn how to win with what you got.
Right.
So
Jamie Moyer kind of
not quite that slow, but yes.
Well,
yes,
no,
yes.
no, but Greg Maddox and Jamie Moyer were
the perfect example.
they weren't gonna blow you away, but they were gonna pitch exactly where they needed to pitch.
Yes.
You know, it was interesting because Maddox, I don't know who the catcher was that they were interviewing in another podcast, but they were talking about how at one point Maddox had completely abandoned signs where he was providing the signs to the catcher.
Yeah, so I know some of those signs. Obviously, I'll never
It's like
give
scratching his
I'll never
face
guy away
and-
the way he caught the ball, scratching his face.
Yeah.
But he was so good at locating the ball, and his stuff wasn't overpowering. The catcher would just set up in a spot. So his ball was either going to move left 3 inches,
Right.
move right 3 inches, or drop 3 inches. So you didn't really need to know what was coming because it wasn't like 95 to 60.
Right.
It was like all
It was
within
just
that.
coming there.
It was just coming there.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that's a crazy trust factor to having the pitcher
Insane.
and the catcher to just throw whatever you want.
It's insane.
That's why I'm saying he was so far ahead of the curve from a mental standpoint or like understanding, like even just learning from him of we'd be sitting on the couch inside watching the game because we used to have to do the chart.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were doing the chart, you could do it from inside watching on TV because you could see from behind.
Sure.
And if not, you were in the dugout. If you want to take an inning break from the dugout, you go inside, sit on the couch, and you're learning a lot there, too. I know you're not out there maybe going, hey, come on, Hobby.
Yeah.
You're still helping
You're
your
dissecting
team
the
win
game.
because you're learning for your next start.
Right.
And Maddox had this innate ability, and it was all information-based, based off hitter's swing path, how he threw, positioning of players. And he would tell, like, hey, Chipper, move over two steps. The ball's coming to you. He executes his pitch. Ball hits the Chipper. Boom. And then you start to ask him, whoa, what'd you think? How'd you do that? What were you thinking? Then we're inside. We're facing Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds, that series, I think, hit like 8 home runs against us. John Burkett was pitching, similar pitcher to Maddox. And he was going through the sequencing of like, all right, fastball here, change up here. And he got to a count, whether it was 2-0, 2-1, 1-2, whatever the count was. He goes, listen, the right pitch is a cutter inside. If he executes his pitch, the best thing he could do is hit a broken bat bloop over the shortstop set. And you're looking at him like, okay. Like, well, you know, cutter inside, broken bat hit, blooper over the shortstop set. And then that just triggered like, all right, what does this guy know that I don't know?
Right.
And you
What's
start,
he seeing?
that's it. And then you just start to learn. And you start to, and I started trying to incorporate that into my game as time went on. Maybe I didn't do it as well as him, but you're always still trying to learn and get better.
You talked about Chicago being your favorite city. You know, obviously being a Major League Baseball player with a family, you know, tough, right? Going constantly traveling throughout the summer. You know, how did you balance, you know, that aspect of your life? And now being retired, you know, now you're watching your kids play. How's that play into the fact that you were a professional baseball player, now watching your kids go through the recruiting process, be, you know, great athletes, lacrosse, tennis, baseball? What things did you learn being the athlete and then becoming the parent?
Well, Lincroft in Middletown is now on the list of favorite cities.
Okay,
to
good.
make
There
you proud. There
I
you go.
love that.
I've got to
There
put it
it
on there.
is.
But it's maybe somebody in my position doing that I did from an athletic standpoint and them trying to be athletes.
Mhm.
I'm never trying to live through my kids. I just loved what I did so much. Financial thing aside, if I could play Major League Baseball and travel the way I did and be around the guys for 65 years, I would.
Mhm.
Like the competitive side, how we were treated traveling, the cities we got to see, the whole lifestyle was amazing, right? So, and I just try to impart, like, if this is the future of what you want. And now even more so, like college players now are getting treated like pros, like
Yeah.
right, even maybe better sometimes.
NILs are it's just
They're
crazy.
through the roof.
Yeah.
And the accessibility to their what they have technology and the weight room and the foods they get fed and how they travel. And so I always try to impart what I internalize and how I treated myself. And sometimes it comes off like rough and intense, but I that's how I treated myself internally.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was outwardly, people would look at me like, this guy's out of his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like this. So when I do my kid, and there also is that tough dynamic of I'm still dad, and you try to tell them, can we remove the dad title and just look at me as like an information coach title
Mm-hmm.
on the field stuff. So I look at sports even before kids in a whole different light. I don't watch it from a fan entertainment value anymore. I would watch golf and watch golfers' swings to help me with my golf swing. I'm not worried about a guy putting a ball in.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not like rooting for the Yankees or for the Cardinals. I will never root against anybody. I want to see them do well, but I became more of like a student of the games, understanding like
fan of the game.
instead of a fan of the game. Like this quarterback should have went here because of this. That's how I watch sports now. I know people. That's just how I pattern my brain. That's me always trying to learn and get better and understanding the competitive side and different ways to win. So I'm not very like Rudy, for example, like rah-rah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm more like, so when I watch my kids' games, I'm dissecting you. And I'm dissecting every other kid on the field. I'm comparing you to the guy at Duke that you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
then comparing him to the Yankees second baseman. Like, if this is what you want to do and this is where you want to go, well, I have to be honest with you to tell you, like, this is what you're doing right, but this is also what you're doing wrong. So that's fun for me. Like, people think it's still fun for me to watch my kids perform, but I'm always like, we could be better. We could be better. Like, this weekend, my son played his first Wagner college baseball game, little Division I school in Staten Island.
Yeah.
And watching him as an 18-year-old compete with a 23-year-old and other catchers and earning his spot on the field. I don't want anything given to him. Maybe he goes back to something he learned from me when he was 12. But I was very proud of him that he sort of accomplished one of the goals that he wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully he doesn't stop to want to learn to get better. And that's the same thing for my daughters, who one is in college. She's a junior at Auburn University, not playing sports, but maybe we take that same approach to what you want to be in the future
Mm-hmm.
as a mom, or she's doing biomedical sciences and psychology, whatever field you choose to go. Can we take that same mentality of how can we be better to progress ourselves? And then I got a sophomore in high school at Middletown South. Same thing, tennis, lacrosse. I'm going to be on you. Like, until you tell me I'm just doing this for fun, I'm going to be on you a
We're
little
doing
bit.
this to
We're going to
compete.
do this to compete and win and go far. Until you let me know this is, and that's with all my kids or any kid. Like, I work with other kids in college. I help guys with their golf swing. And if they say the goal is X, then I know where to like draw the line.
Mm-hmm.
But it is fun to see your kids grow from, athletically, obviously other stuff that we were talking about, athletic side of it, from a young 5, 6, 7-year-old athlete into high school, eventually into college athlete, and watch the growth pattern, and watch the work they put in and eventually get some of the results and the fruition of what they wanted.
What motivates you now?
Wow, that's a great question. So far, it's probably that right now, investing into my kids' future more than anything, to want them to be as successful as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
I am retired. I don't have a second career. I had my career. Thank God the game's treated me well financially, where I could sort of sit back and not have to worry about paying my bills and getting things done. So the drive of always being really good is my motivation, but I haven't found that next, outside of my kids' future and their growth as human beings and being a productive part of society, whether it's athletically or job-wise. The big thing is going to be once my youngest daughter goes to college, that's the next. Like, now I'll have a lot of free times. I'm not going to be going to all their games on the weekend, which takes up a lot of time, driving them to practice. I'm helping out at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
Some things may dwindle as time goes on, and I'm going to have to find something, because my thing is passions come and go, but obsessions don't, right? So, like, my love for baseball is enormous. My love for sports is enormous. But my obsession for being great blows it away. So now I can't play baseball anymore, right? I'm eventually not going to be able to play men's basketball, let's per se. Golf, you could sort of extend the life of golf. So you sort of now have to find this new passion to fuel your obsession. And that's going to be probably 2-3 years down the road. Maybe a few years of traveling with the wife and just jumping on a plane and going wherever. Maybe, I don't know, whatever. Then eventually it becomes grandkids, right? Who knows? But I always try to leave my options open, and I'm always in my own little head recreating situations of where I could see myself tomorrow or in 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And whether I go to attack it, we'll see.
So last sports question.
Mm-hmm.
Had a long career, successful career, made it to the show that less than 5% of people, probably less than that, probably 1% of people make it to. What's the moment, the point of your career that you enjoyed? Might not have been the biggest game, but it was the biggest, most meaningful moment for you as an athlete.
I'm going to give you a few. So, one, able to pitch and be a New Yorker. I started the 9/11 game, the first sporting event in New York after 9/11, which was a tragedy. Do I wish I ever started that game? No, because I wish that event never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, tragedy strikes, and how we deal with it is the next option, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as a young 23-year-old, I was with the Atlanta Braves, and I started against the Mets in that first game back. So that was sort of a moment for me, being a New Yorker and being part of the healing process. Not only New York, but the country in reality. But
Sure.
New York is where it hit home the most, because it was obviously a direct attack on New York, and same as the Pentagon, right?
Yeah.
So I have to say that winning a World Series in 2006 with the Cardinals, also losing one in 2004 with the Cardinals, those were huge, huge moments. Having a long enough career to have my family and my kids see me play. My youngest one, I know, doesn't really remember. My daughter and my son still have a little recollection. But for me, from an internal standpoint, it may sound selfish, but it goes back to in 2009. So 2004 and 5, I had really good first halves, and I thought I should have made the All-Star game.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. If you want to call it a snub, so be it. It is what it is. 2009, I'm with the Rockies in Colorado, and I have another really, really good first half. And there was that thought, possibility. It could be my third time. And so I remember our manager gathering everybody in the locker room, just a team meeting, just normal, like any random. And the whole thing was, hey, we got the All-Star game coming up. We got word. 2 guys in our team got voted to the All-Star game. And I want to congratulate, it was Brad Hopp, our right fielder, and myself. That moment to me internally was really special because of remember, it's a team game, it's an individual game within a team sport.
Sure.
Right? Basketball, football, you can rely on your offensive linemen, play schemes to help you score a basket. And I don't want to take away from the World Series. And I would never trade that World Series for the All-Star game. I'm not saying that. But from an internal satisfaction, gratification, where I had to take a moment and go to after the team congratulated you, sort of take a moment and in the hallway by myself to process, this is a reason you work. You were finally noticed, which should have happened earlier. by your peers and other coaches and all this work you put in. For me, that had to be like that moment was special to me because I always put so much work in, and you want to be noticed. Like, I know we're at the big league level, we're past the other 99.999% of people, but in your field, it's nice to be noticed as one of the elite within your field. So that moment for me was really special. Obviously getting called up, my first call up.
Sure.
But that was just, it wasn't stopping that.
And was that All-Star game in New York?
That was the year. Next year was in New York. It was in St. Louis, which was nice.
Oh, okay. So
which
you
was
got to
even
return
special.
home.
So I got a really nice ovation from the St. Louis fans. But to me, that was like the culmination of like all this work you did and paid off. And listen, I won my 15 games and contributed to a World Series, but then maybe with two other pitchers better than me that got a little more of the credit.
Right.
But I knew what I did for the team. But this is something like, okay, I did what I had to do, and I'm finally reaping some of the rewards. More from just like that standpoint more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was earned. It wasn't given. Everything you did, like we talked about earlier, from 10 years old on.
That's amazing. So, so that was 2009?
2009.
So the NL manager was Charlie Manuel, I guess,
Yes,
right?
Charlie Manuel.
Charlie Manuel. And the
Great guy.
AL was Joe Madden, I guess, right? Because it was Phillies,
was
Tampa
it Joe
Bay.
Madden or was it Joe Torre?
2009, the Phillies would go play the Yankees in the World Series and lose to the Yankees.
So it might have been Joe Torre, possibly. I don't remember the American manager, but I remember Charlie Manuel. I know 100%.
Yeah.
Being a Philly fan, he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Good human being, great baseball guy, just knowledgeable. Everybody loved him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
so.
Now I'm post-career. I'm here in Middletown, New Jersey. It's probably one of the best moves we made. Should have did it 6-7 years ago, but we're here now. We're happy to be part of this community and be embraced. From my son who graduated Middletown South, only being there 2 years, and now my daughter going through 8th grade and now in high school.
Well, Jason Marquis, not just a terrific guy, terrific human being, a great family man, an MLB All-Star, an MLB World Series champion, and a guy ready to give all the knowledge he has to everybody that wants to be to hit that ceiling, to run from the basement to the second floor and do it faster and better than the next person. Jason, appreciate you coming in. Appreciate you really giving us a deep dive into what your career, how you started, how you ended, all those good points in the middle, the moments that defined your career, and now to have you as a Middletown resident, it means a lot to me that you took time, and means a lot to all the people that you've had an impact on, that have asked you for that advice as a competitor, as an athlete, and as a good human being and family man. Appreciate you making the time to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you brought me on. I know this was the condensed short story version, because I could sit here for days and weeks and get really in depth. But
what are you doing next week then?
Whenever you want. I'll be back whenever you want. Believe me, it's an open invitation on my end. But I always try to be impactful, help that next generation, I don't even say reach the ceiling, because there should be no ceiling. Raise their floor and keep shooting for the stars. And, always around to lend a helping hand and talk whenever you like.
Love it. You got it here first on Locally Sourced, Middletown's official podcast. Jason Marquis, the man, the All-Star, the World Series champion, and most importantly, a Middletown resident.
Yes.
Jason, thanks for being here, brother.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.